Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of 3 Minutes to Vitality. And this week I want to talk a little bit about something that's really a little unusual because we think about osteoarthritis, degenerative arthritis, as being an older person's disease. What current studies are showing us is that actually if you were born before 1945, you're 2.5 times more likely to have degenerative osteoarthritis than you were if you were born after. Interesting. Why is that? Because if it's an older person's disease, if you're born before 1945, you're an older person. And we tend to think of that. What we're finding is that's absolutely not true. Well, what is it that does it? The research is now showing us that it's obesity. With the explosion of us being overweight and obese in our society, that increases the rate of what are called inflammatory biomarkers, inflammatory byproducts in our bodies from carrying too much fat. It's what happens inside of us. And we know that inflammation creates damage in the joint lining, which is what sets up arthritis. And arthritis itself, osteoarthritis, itis means inflammation. But it's actually the inflammation that creates the joint destruction. It's not the joint destruction that's creating the inflammation. And we know this because we actually had a group of rats where it's kind of interesting, they actually decimated the microbiome, the gut flora, the bacteria in the colon, which we've talked about before. And they got rid of that, and they had a group of mice that were engineered to be heavy, and they fed them all this stuff that made them fat without the gut bacteria. They had another group of mice that they had with normal gut bacteria that were of normal body weight, and they fed them the same things, etc. And what they found was when they used this thing called a prebiotic, which really is nothing more than fiber. There's a fancy name for the one that they used, but it specifically actually started to proliferate, start the growth of a particular species of bacterium that's a good bacterium that's normally in our colons. And as that built up, the inflammation actually went way down, and the joint destruction that was being exhibited was completely stopped. Not just retarded or slowed down, it was stopped completely, and that was without the animal losing any weight whatsoever. So in the presence of enough of this fiber, which created then this other bacteria to become more populated, then the joint damage stops. And that's with or without being overweight. And what's interesting is for a long time we thought of that it was being overweight was because it was just carrying too much that would cause joints to wear out from having too much of a load. What we know now is that's not 100% true at all. Because people would have knee degeneration, and an orthopedist or another physician would say it's because you're overweight and we need to do all this. What we found out is that same person has a significant likelihood that they're going to have arthritis in their hands when, again, there's no increased risk of burden of weight in the hands themselves. So it's an interesting thing that we're seeing. And what we also know then is it also is being attributed to movement, because we become much more and more sedentary as we've got really neat conveniences of technology. We've become more sedentary and we don't move as much. And we know that movement also changes the bacteria in our colon and the population that we find there. Really interesting. So being overweight just isn't uncomfortable. It just doesn't lead to cancers, which it does. 650,000 cancers directly attributed to being overweight in the last couple of years. Wow. Right? It increases the risk of diabetes, of Alzheimer's disease, of heart disease, of everything. But we know it increases the risk of, not the risk, but the legitimacy of having all of this inflammation, which is probably one of the things that's leading to these other disorders as well. So again, really important to make sure we're doing what we need to do to try and lose as much weight as we can, to be a bit more active, and to bring down inflammation as well. We'll talk about that in another episode too, and address it just a little bit further. So sure appreciate your time and for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.